The ghost selection.
What's he saying?
The fake
It's a
referee
really good
scheme
ball.
in the
It's
2010 World Cup. In the heart of Africa, in 2010, a nation was preparing to shine. The world turned its eyes to the south, where football promised to consecrate itself. South Africa, land of struggles and hope. It would be the stage of the World Cup, anyway. But behind the smiles, flags and party, a dark secret was hiding there. It wasn't just soccer that was played, but interests, money and power. And before the ball officially rolled, something strange started to happen. Suspicious friendlies appeared on the agenda. Obscure games, almost without explanation. Unknown selections, false name judges, and dubious penalties in repetition. Fans didn't notice right away, but attentive glances saw the anomaly. Why so many bizarre penalties all of a sudden? Why did the referees look like ghosts on the line? The smell of fraud hovered in the air, like smoke before the fatal fire. And in the epicenter of this game of shadows, it was an international organization, a mafia on the other side of the world, expert in manipulating results, moving billions in illegal bets, corrupting even the sacred shields. They didn't need players, only from those who whistle, from those who decide. With referees in the pocket and bought judgments, the fate of the games changes in one slip. This is the story that almost no one told. From the dirtiest pre-cup in modern history, with referees who didn't actually exist, and selections used as ephemeral pieces. Before the 2010 World Cup starts, the South African team had already won. But not with talent or justice in the field. He seats with tricks, and with the game sold. If you're enjoying this dark story, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more hidden truths from football's shadow side. The World Cup hadn't started yet, but the lawns already told secrets. Friendly arose in a strange sequence, with rivals who didn't even pass the plots. China, Guatemala, Thailand, countries that barely crossed each other in history. They played against the Bafana, and they always left penalties in their memory. On the field, referees with unlikely names. No FIFA registrations, no origin. They whistled penalties with invisible touch, as if there were a force in decay. 5 penalties in one game? That's what South Africa saw. Easy defeats, without sweat or tactics. Victories with a taste of witchcraft. The crowd vibrated without understanding, while fraud became routine. The commentators avoided questions, fearing to touch the wound that contaminates. The head of local arbitration was suspicious, but his voice was lost in the noise. Who dared to question the system? Soon he was silenced, dejected. And at the top of the silent gear, a name began to repeat itself. Raj Perumal, master of manipulation. The football architect to collapse. Directly from Singapore, without ever stepping on the field. He commanded referees like puppets, with phone calls and deposits in offshores. Determined penalties like prophets. The matches were hand-picked, and the fake judges flew like shadows. They recorded fake names in spreadsheets, and they disappeared from the statistics like bombs. South Africa, thirsty for respect. I closed my eyes to the truth of the game. It was your cup, your chance, your time, even if it cost to sell the fire. But who plays with the underworld of betting? He ends up trapped in his own trap. And while FIFA smiled at the cameras, the dirt grew under the furniture. Raj Perumal was not a player, neither technician nor ordinary entrepreneur. It was a ghost that walked in the shadows, creating results from no side. With contacts on 3 continents, and millions flowing into illegal bets. He bought referees like cheap pieces. I paid in cash, promises or signs. He created fake games in real calendars. He sent judges with lying documents, changed the score before the initial whistle, and he came out unharmed, even with dangerous traces. He was the boss of the Asian football mafia, a network that bet against logic. They didn't need dribbles or talents, only a well-marked penalty in the chronicle. I commanded everything from discreet hotels, using disposable chips, encrypted networks, His instructions were cold and surgical, like a master of calculated cheating. South Africa's friendly matches. They were perfect for your plans. No inspection, little press, and foreign referees without human names. Some came from Nigeria, others from Tanzania. Others didn't even exist in the official records. They used stolen identities of dead referees, or names generated by digital systems. What about the leaders? They closed their eyes. They wanted victories to sell hope. It didn't matter the blood behind the scenes, while the people danced in confidence. But a closer look was enough to see that the game was contaminated. Ridiculous penalties, cards for no reason, addicted and rehearsed results. Football became a theater of horror, and the referee, actor paid in the role, while Wilson counted his profits. The truth was bleeding under the sky. South Africa versus Guatemala, 5 goals. 3 from penalties, 2 without dispute. The referee pretended to see fouls that didn't exist, and each whistle caused restlessness. Against Thailand, another bizarre penalty, with the defender not even inside the area. The move did not show any infraction, but the judge scored with daily conviction. Games against smaller teams, with rotes that seemed combined. The opposing players didn't even react, as pieces within armed rules. The images showed confused faces, immovable defenders, late goalkeepers, as if they followed invisible instructions, as if they knew, today is the day to be dominated. The South African coach celebrated, but deep down, something bothered him. He saw that the triumphs had no sweat, and that the victories were not won, they were enough. But talking was too dangerous. There were only a few days left for the opening, and South Africa needed to present itself strong, even if the force came from the rupture. Independent newspapers began to investigate, but soon they were silenced or ignored. FIFA, pressured by sponsors, I preferred peace to the revealed scandal. And so the games succeeded each other, each one stranger than the last. And while the stadiums gained color, the underworld gained more fervor. Wilson went unpunished in his mission, with referees who didn't even exist on paper. He was the creator of parallel realities, the owner of an artificial and cruel world. At the FIFA headquarters in Zurich, the smiles tried to disguise tension. The entity was aware of the growing complaints, but he acted with cold omission. The reports arrived discreetly, with suspicious data, videos, and names. But for FIFA, pre-cup scandal, it was a stain that would cost effects. Blatter preferred to ignore the noise. I was afraid that any noise would turn to a storm. The World Cup was a symbol of inclusion and celebration. There was no room for truths on the grid. Independent investigators warned, but they were treated as disturbing. Internal commissions analyzed the case. While the dirt went down the corridors, a royal referee denounced the fraud, saying that his name was faked, that he never whistled such a match. But he was listed as a judge on the lawn. The complaint was quickly shelved, classified as documentation error. And FIFA followed its schedule, ignoring the manipulation. Bets flowed in record volumes. On hidden websites in East Asia, the mafia earned millions in minutes, thanks to a penalty given by a plastic referee. It was an invisible war in football, where the enemy didn't wear a shirt, where the field was just a stage of deception, and the judge, a submissive bait. Meanwhile, South Africa smiled, presenting itself as an emerging power. But inside the locker rooms and dark rooms, the truth was a latent burden. The World Cup was approaching with great strides, and the scandal was still a secret. But the corruption network was already threatening to break, with a noise that would come early. The Asian mafia was not new. It had roots that came from the 90s. He handled small leagues, then bigger ones, always with cold and violent tactics. It started in Singapore, then Malaysia, and soon he arrived in Africa, where he found space. There, with few resources and inspection, they set up their base, step by step. They paid with dollars in brown envelopes, or transfers by parallel banks. They used ghost company names, and they laundered money in parallel contracts. Perumal, the conductor of this dark network, I had already manipulated previous cups. He had bought judges in Oceania and Asia, and now I wanted the biggest stage. South Africa was the ideal door, because the country needed to stand out. Any victory, even suspicious, it would help national pride to shine. Judges from Nigeria, Togo, Kenya and Sudan. They received ready-made orders and instructions. It was enough to whistle according to the script, and make sure the scoreboard was without accounts. The Mafia bet on the exact minute of the goal, in the team that would make the first corner. Everything was millimetrically planned, like a dance from someone else's script. It was football turned into a betting exchange, with odds that changed like wind. Each whistle generated a fortune, each corner a slow movement, and the players, they were secondary parts, running for honor without knowing about the theater, while judges decided the outcomes, sitting on the throne of an ungrateful pact. If you're enjoying this dark story, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more hidden truths from football's shadow side. It was in the friendly against Colombia that everything became more evident. A game with no technical purpose, but that caught the attention of many people. 2 penalties for South Africa, both without any real contact. The ball wasn't even in dispute, but the referee whistled, impartial. The judge was Nigerian, they said, but his name was not on records. No federation recognized him. His face was strange, his gestures mixed. The images went viral in secret forums. Experts noticed the manipulation. The pattern was repeated in other games, like a corruption algorithm. Colombia protested discreetly, but I didn't want to tarnish the diplomatic relationship. He accepted the defeat, signed the protocol. While internally, there was talk of magic. Some Colombian athletes reported that the judge didn't even speak Spanish or English. He communicated only by gestures, and I avoided any contact once. The fans laughed on social networks, finding the absurd bids funny. But behind the laughter, there was a gear, with roots in dark markets. The game against Colombia was the drop. That made the tension lead behind the scenes. The international press began to dig, searching for names, links and authors. Perumal knew that the tide was changing, and it began to disappear from the connections. But the evidence was already scattered. In videos, reports and transcripts. An anonymous complaint reached FIFA, with data, videos and details on a flash drive. He showed the scheme, the fake referees, and Perumal's name as he writes. The ethics committee opened an investigation, but with no intention of going too deep. Did you know that any pre-cup scandal, it could destroy commercial contracts? South Africa was in the center of the party, but also in the center of manipulation. The documents indicated that 4 games, they were influenced by corruption. The FBI was discreetly activated, since bets involved American banks. Perumal, now sought after internationally, it became the target of dossiers and plans. In parallel, real referees appeared, saying that their names were used. One of them had already been retired for years, but he whistled 2 games on the lawns. It was the definitive proof of the farce, that the judges were administrative clones, stolen or invented identities, in convocation lists without files. But FIFA hesitated to expose the scandal. He decided to protect the image of the tournament. He limited himself to suspending some involved, and muffled the rest with someone else's cloth. The truth, however, had already leaked. For journalists, blogs, and archives, it was a matter of time before the bomb exploded, and show the underworld that was in the living. Perumal, now a targeted ghost. He changed countries like a spy. It passed through borders with false documents, afraid of handcuffs in his hand. But your luck wouldn't last forever. The international siege was closing. Authorities from 5 countries tracked him, and his name finally weighed. He was arrested in Finland in an operation. using a false diplomat's passport. He carried an encrypted laptop with him, with spreadsheets, transfers, and letter. The content was explosive and direct. It brought evidence of manipulated games. Dozens of friendly matches around the world. All for him, coldly calculated. Games in Africa, Asia, and Europe, with paid referees and defined scripts. The 2010 World Cup was among them, with South Africa in the included files. Perumal negotiated an award-winning denunciation, revealed names, schemes, and connections. He said he didn't act alone, not even on his own. That entire federations closed the gates. He cited managers and intermediaries, people who circulated in FIFA corridors, people who smile at press conferences. But from behind I squeezed the hand that corrupted. Interpol officially entered the scene, and the net tentacles began to appear. World football was forced to look in the mirror, and the reflection was difficult to recognize. The expression, ghost selection, was born. In the muffled corridors of the investigation. It wasn't just about dubious players, but about games that were never real, then. Every match before the World Cup. It was like a poorly staged rehearsal. A theater to deceive the fans. A trick to fool the result. South Africa, without knowing or pretending not to know. It became a symbol of this world farce. Your victories before the royal tournament. They were bought with spiral whistles. The official statistics have never changed. The goals are there, the videos too. But the records are now stains. From a system that failed for good. Ghost selection became a term of denunciation, of how football can be manipulated. From how to the dream of a World Cup. It can be sold and tampered with. Newspapers began to publish dossiers, with evidence and names of those involved. Some referees mysteriously disappeared. Others were found, destroyed. The fans felt the betrayal on the skin, especially the South Africans of faith. That pride of recent victories. Now it tasted like coffee with chul. But football moves forward, always, even when stained by corruption. And the ghost selection became a myth. More real than the selection itself. The bettors knew everything before. They knew who would make the goal, the time, the score. They bet on corners at 20 minutes. And they won with precision to scare. This was the clearest sign of the crime. Odds that plummeted for no reason. Asian websites adjusted values. Even before the ball is in rotation. It wasn't just a manipulated game. It was the entire system at the service of profit. And while a judge blew the whistle, someone became a millionaire in a short loop. The manipulated odds were traceable, but no one wanted to pull the thread. Because at the end of the ball I would find powerful people, people of deviation. Perumal spoke naturally about changing destinations with one click. He said, with the right judge, I don't need the star. I just need him to fake a pike. And they really pretended. Cards for nothing. Missed absences with purposeful delay. Contactless penalties, invisible offs, and even fatally prolonged additions. Football became algorithm, statistic, controlled by people who have never played. And the fans, faithful, innocent. They didn't know that the theater had already started. When the truth began to circulate, South Africa has entered a state of denial. Leaders rejected any guilt. They said they were the target of persecution. But former employees started talking. In interviews, letters, and confessions. They said that the referees were hired through an intermediary with 1,000 functions. This intermediary had a connection with Perumal, and he received commissions for each judge. He mounted the scale mysteriously, and delivered the game as if it were a quiz. The Federation claimed full innocence. She said she was deceived like any fan. But documents showed direct signature. Emails that left no vain margin. The South African people were divided between anger, shame, and defense. Some blamed foreigners. Others said, we were accomplices of beauty. The government promised an investigation, but he never published results. The truth was buried in commissions, with sealed and stamped reports. FIFA opted for the older way. Silence as a diplomatic shield. He waited for the scandal to lose strength. May the noise disappear in the automatic noise. He discreetly suspended some involved, but without giving names or announcing punishment. He said he would review internal processes. While time erased the indignation, Blatter was questioned by journalists. But he deviated like someone who plays tennis. They are unfounded accusations, he said. Even with proof, even on LED panels. It was the FIFA protocol in action. Ignore, deny, bury, smile. The cycle was repeated with precision, whenever the dirt threatened to appear. And so the ghost selection disappeared from the official football news. It became taboo in FIFA meetings. A ghost buried in the sheet. With Perumal under international custody, the house of cards began to collapse. Names that lived far from the spotlight. They began, one by one, to emerge. Small and medium league leaders. They were cited in sealed documents. Judges from Asia, Africa, and Europe. They had their names marked. Some denied, others disappeared. And many simply disappeared from the scene. With broken contracts and torn reputations, the Mafia network revealed its antenna. Interpol released red alerts, looking for accomplices still free. And clubs started reviewing matches, looking for signs that were not visible before. The press finally had access. The spreadsheets that proved the scheme, with dates, times, and amounts paid. Football became a movie soap opera. Countries demanded public hearings. But FIFA refused to summon. Protected your financial empire. Even sinking in contradiction. In the midst of the fall of the untouchables, the common fan saw himself betrayed. The sport I loved and followed so much. It was now a corrupted system. The figures involved in the scandal. They exceeded $100 million. Bets made in real time. Profits in paradises and bigger safes. The money flowed through clandestine banks. In islands without law and eternal secrecy. With each whistle, a new fortune. With each move, a new hell. The police tracked digital transactions. But I found barriers on the way. Front companies, unreachable offshores. And contracts signed with parchment. Some payments were made in kind. Taken in suitcases, like in the movies. Others came via cryptocurrencies. Escaping from systems and regimes. The money that corrupted the referees. He paid for cars, mansions, and status. But I also bought silence and protection. In cabinets with full carpets. Until today, not all values have been recovered. Many involved are still on the loose. But the invisible trail left scars. Even in files given as dead. If you're enjoying this dark story, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more hidden truths from football's shadow side. Although the manipulated games were friendly, they shaped the World Cup scenario. South Africa's inflated confidence, and the illusion that they were at the top of the troop. They entered the tournament as a sensation, but soon reality collected the debt. The euphoria forged in bought victories. It collapsed when the ball was split. In the group stage, the team suffered, facing well-prepared teams. No ghost penalties or allied referees. The defeats were painful and heavy. They finished outside the round of 16, being the first hosts to fall. The dream turned into mass frustration, and the fans could only applaud and smile. But behind the scenes, the ghosts followed, haunting reports and meetings, and the doubt hovered in the corridors. And if everything had been illusions, the phantom selection was just the showcase of a much deeper system, a symptom of an old cancer, spread around the globe of dirty football. Other cases would arise in the following years, with referees bought in real competitions. From the Nigerian League to the Turkish Second Division, the pattern returned with equal signs. Perumal was not the only one, nor the worst, just the face of a larger structure. While the world focuses on stars and goals, the real game takes place in the hallway. Investigations arise, reports disappear, and the cycle repeats itself again. Manipulating is no exception, It's a model. When there is so much money to extract, FIFA promises reforms and audits. But it keeps the control centralized. And who dares to break this silence ends up punished or silenced. Today, few remember the phantom selection. Perumal is no longer a headline. But in digital files and obscure videos, the scandal continues in the form of a silhouette. South Africa tries to rewrite history, celebrating the party, forgetting the frame. But the records are not erased like that. Not even the pain of those who saw the lack of love. Some referees never whistled again. Others live under protection. And many of those involved, they still deny any participation. But the stain is there, in every replay, in every penalty for no reason. The illusion became an eternal record, a tattoo made in corruption. The fans who vibrated in the friendlies. Today they wonder about the value of emotion. I wonder if that was really soccer, or just part of a staging. The commentators who praised the bids. Now they avoid touching this past. They prefer to remember the full stadiums, of the truth that it was buried. The transmissions are still available, with narrations that ignore the farce. But who watches with attentive eyes, realize that there is something that is not disguised. The pace of the game was strange. The reaction of the rivals, contained. The central referee seemed lost, or maybe very well instructed in the reading. Time doesn't erase this kind of lie. It just turns it into a cold document. But for those who really love soccer, the memory that remains is a challenge. Football refuses to look in the mirror, because the reflex hurts too much. He prefers the mystique of the hero in the field, than accepting ghostly judges. He prefers to hide the staples and spreadsheets, than investigating the rot. And so the cycle is still alive, under the shield of passion. As long as there are billions at stake, there will be those who want to manipulate them. And as long as the entities are accomplices, the whistle will continue to be callous. The ghost selection is an eternal symbol of what football doesn't want to admit, that the winner is not always the best, and that the righteous will not always rise. The ball is round, they say proudly, but the system is square and dark. Broken rules with a simple nod. Promises made in the hardest contract. Ethics is sold as a discourse, but he dies on the silent lawn. While money dictates the scoreboard, the truth drowns in the lying well. Judges trained to see the invisible. They close their eyes to what screams. The grandstand vibrates with passion, without knowing that you watch a writing. Small clubs rarely win, not for lack of soul or sweat, but because the game is played behind the scenes, where the one who pays better wins. And when someone tries to break this pact, it is silenced with official notes. They talk about transparency and compliance. But everything remains the same in the newspapers. That's why the ghost selection haunts. Not only because of the farce of the beaten friendlies, but for revealing what the sport hides between the lines of the sold contracts. This is the end of the forgotten story, of the team that won without real merit. A dark tale of invented referees, and of a corrupt and lethal system. The 2010 World Cup was beautiful to the eyes, but to the archives, it was full of fear. And while the world screamed goal, behind the scenes he laughed at the fan. The ghost selection did indeed exist, not in the cast, but in what was not seen. Victories written with invisible inks, in contracts that stank of cowardice. And today, who remembers all that? Maybe you don't even know how much weight you have. But every manipulated game is a crime. A coup that betrays football too. This was the dark side of the ball, where the whistle is not just sound. It's code, it's cipher, it's command. From those who control everything in the hall. And as long as there is silence and profit, the danger will always be around. Because football, so loved and sacred, you can also cheat without warning. If this story moved you, leave a like to keep these legends alive. Comment your thoughts about Emiliano Sala's tragedy, and don't forget to subscribe. This is just the beginning of football's darkest secrets.